the first. The second is, obviously, when you look at perhaps maybe this is more in comment between Tatele Lekhanyane's question about being a government that's running a welfare state. On another end, it's a neoliberal state. Perhaps maybe to understand what are some of the, given that our GDP growth has been adjusted downwards to 0.1%, what are some of the growth initiatives that Treasury anticipates being able to put forward as points that can go from there? And then perhaps noting some of the issues that are there. Perhaps there's a 5 billion rands contingency budget. Perhaps it might be good for this department to give us a sense of assurance whether that is enough to safeguard, maybe to the previous speaker's questions that speak to issues around geopolitical matters that are occurring, but furthermore, any what is now typically described as acts of God, and I would assume COVID is that, although as a Christian myself, I'm not certain that it is an act of God per se, but we are not in a religious committee, we're in a treasury committee, so that is a debate for another day. Maybe my last question, maybe to Treasury, was to look at budget vote 3, and I know that perhaps maybe that may not be covered, it's on cooperative governance. I know there's been significant underspend and it comes to municipalities in certain areas. I mean, I think of one precise example in Nelson Mandela Bay where the minister had to intervene in limitation of certain disbursements thanks to the administration there. Whether there's a broader practice in this regard, how do we safeguard it over a long period of time? But also I do think that, and maybe this is more a question that we need to think through carefully, is that given, take a city like Johannesburg, where post the advent of load shedding, post the advent of certain citizens being able to take themselves off the grid, the sustainability of Eskom's financial process in being able to meet its objectives. We know that this committee spent in the last administration dealing with bailouts for Eskom. How does that then, given that from a revenue enhancing processes in municipalities, the on sale of bulk services like electricity and water become such big aspects of that? So when we look at then allocations going into the next adjustment, whether there's a sustainability in the funding of local government as it goes, and I'm looking at the cooperative governance budget vote and looking at other aspects where municipalities themselves, some of them may not be fiscally sustainable. So these are some of my questions. Perhaps maybe Treasury can give us guidance from that. I know to new, fresh hands, I don't know if they are legacy hands or fresh. So maybe Honorable Lekhanjane, Honorable Van Rooyen, and Honorable Hlongwane, if you can indicate whether these are new or fresh, or should I then proceed to handing over to Treasury to respond?
Chair, sorry. I just wanted to check, are we going to have a second round of questions or this is the last round?
Well, I think I'm very conscious of time, Honorable Van Rooyen, but if I can request, perhaps Treasury can respond, and perhaps maybe some of the questions that may be follow-ups may be covered within that space. If not, we will allow a second round for sure.
Well, I'm grateful, Chair. Thank
you. There was another question, Honorable Lekhanjane.
Chair, Honorable Chair.
Yes, sir.
No, I have lowered my hand.
Oh, have you lowered your hand?
It was a legacy hand, yeah.
I'm offering a free workshop on Zoom, Honorable Sir. So perhaps you and I can spend some time together doing a peer review. Is what it would be. Let me hand over to Treasury to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by reiterating what the DG said. Given that there are new members of the committee, largely new, maybe we're going to need a session where at the request of the committee again, we take the committee through how the budget process, what are the key issues, and so on moving forward. Honorable Van Rooyen, I understand because there was an apology for him that he's going to come late, and he joined after I've explained the delays. Let me recap. With the appropriation, as Honorable Van Rooyen would know, we tabled the budget in February. We allow a lot of discussion, largely March, April, and adopted in May. Because of the elections, Parliament had to, there's a normal word they use. When Parliament closes, there's a nice English word they use. Parliament rises. Parliament rose earlier because of the elections before we could conclude the budget. So there was no delay in that sense because we tabled it in February. We never miss February. What then happened is that as a result of that, you'll recall last week, it was part of the legislation that was resurrected in Parliament because it was not concluded as a result of Parliament rising early than necessary. It was not a delay per se. One question has been asked about the medical in hospitals, in health departments, particularly the Eastern Cape. I can't remember the other one with medical legals. Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. We're facing a huge number of legal cases in those two provinces, which now run into billions. Khale will probably come up with the exact numbers. It's a major risk for the budget process, particularly in those provinces. A key area of weakness there is in some of the inefficiencies. People can win cases because documentation has not been, we can't provide the necessary documentation. We need to help find a way of helping that. Is the NDP still alive? Or there was an NDP question related also versus health and education. Let me just say one of the key problems we have are policy choices which are being made. It's going to come back to the welfare state issue. I'm going to link that question. I call it policy question being made. You've got an environment where the economy has not been growing for almost over a decade. Your economy has not been growing on average at 0.8% over a decade. And the population has been growing at on average 1.41%, which means per capita as a nation, we're getting poorer. That in itself put pressure on the fiscus that in the absence of unemployment, how do you deal with poverty? And therefore, the policy choices that have been made, I'm not justifying them in whatever way. The policy choices that have been made have been to say, look, we need to manage these poverty issues by putting more money on grants. The latest being the SRD, which on its own is massive, is about 40 billion. In that sense, it reinforces the welfare notion of the state. There's this Professor Philip Becker from Free State, who wrote the notion that South Africa, we can't claim the conundrum of the developmental state. We can't claim to be a developmental state because the key objective of a development state, we're not meeting that. The closest we can is he says we're not even a welfare state. The closest we can is to claim to be a welfare state. So we need really, I appreciate that the committee is grappling with this fundamental strategic question, which I hope these questions are not going to be raised. Part of the difficult check, which you'll notice when you go into other committees, else, we get grilled. Even if it's correctional services that have underspent, the Correctional Service Committee calls us to explain why correctional services has underspent instead of grilling correctional services. But I hope this debate, I hope this strategic questions we're posing will also be posing in the different committees. I'm going to be controversial on NEFSAS because part of the difficulty now we're confronting an issue of distribution. If you ask me, NEFSAS is an institution which is strange in my view. You create an institution to be a conduit between the universities and the Department of Higher Education instead of transferring money straight to the Department of Higher Education and to avoid all these unnecessary costs. So the issue in NEFSAS as we speak is not an underfunding question. We sit at about 59 billion this year. Yeah, this year we sit at about, so it's not an underfunding question. In fact, even when all other departments, when we're doing a major problem we've done a bailout over the years of state-owned enterprises. But what the effect of that has been to impact on service delivery on frontline departments. But NEFSAS never suffered this during that period. So, Honorable Khanyan raises the issue of accountability. I would argue it's going to be important for those distributions because the accountability question rests with the line function department because they are not saying we didn't get money. They got money, but there's a challenge about distribution. Somebody somewhere in the line function department must account for that. Have we presented agriculture and land reform as one department? Yes. For now, they are one vote. They are one vote. Moving forward in the budget we're going to be tabling in February, we hope they would have been successfully separated in two separate votes. For now, when we tabled the budget in February, they were one vote. COVID preparedness, something like that, is an important discussion. In the G20s, there's one theme which is being debated, and that theme is pandemic preparedness. Pandemic preparedness. So the question is relevant. To what extent are we as South Africa dealing with that? And I think, in a sense, we're beginning to deal with that question. But if anything happens, for now, we have presented we still have the contingent reserve. Is it sufficient? It may not be sufficient. Let me just give you an example. When we're hit by the number of these disasters, we do have funds for disasters, but they were quickly exhausted. We had to draw from the contingent reserve. But we're building on that contingent reserve over the years. So, for instance, it's 5 billion now, it's going to be a different amount next year. We're beginning to build it in order to prepare for that eventuality. Is the NDP still a government program? The answer is yes. Of course, for the first time, the government of national unity will be meeting in the Lekotla next weekend. We will frame how do we approach these issues. We have had the growth initiatives, starting with the document produced by National Treasury in 2019, leading to the structural reforms now under Operation Vulindlela. The municipalities are interesting things, Honorable Chair. You have got the extremes. You have got a Nelson Mandela, which has got a surplus of 4.8 billion rand, which they can spend because they fight over who should get the tender. There's one issue there. But you have, on the one hand, 175 municipalities that have got unfunded budgets. So we work with all of those challenges as we deal with this But as I conclude, Chair, you are raising a fundamental challenge which we're going to have. All municipalities that are basing their revenue on electricity, for instance. With the deregulation of that industry, but that means that source of revenue is going to disappear from municipalities. We need to think through how are we going to make sure that these municipalities are financially sustainable in the long term. So it's one of the challenges we're facing. My deputy, who's on the who's online, Deputy Sarapendo, says that he wants to dig and investigate that matter quite interestingly. So we're discussing it. I'm raising that issue to say we're discussing it. I don't know, DG, do you have any other additions? Tim?
Yeah, no, thanks, Minister. I think you've covered most of the questions. Actually, there were one or two technical questions about environments and section 16 approvals, which I'll ask Rendani to speak to. And then if there are other questions the colleagues want to come in on, they should just indicate to us. I just want to make one point from my side, Minister and chairs, around the issue, Chair, which you mentioned on municipal debt relief. The committee members will know that shortly after the budget, we announced a program for municipalities who want to sign up to a program of improving their revenue, of installing prepaid meters, of improving the way in which they manage the electricity revenue, for them to sign up for a program by which their debt with Eskom will be relieved. And the way it was intended to work was that in the first year, we monitor the municipalities that are signed up, and then we, those who meet all the conditions would have 1/3 of their Eskom debt relieved in the first year, and then another third after the second year, and so on. For us, it was a mechanism to see how we can deal with the structural problems at a municipal level around revenue collection and the payment for electricity, but use it also to deal with the unsustainable debt that municipalities owe to Eskom. We had close to 80 municipalities that have signed up to the program, and at the start of the program, the debt owed by municipalities to Eskom was somewhere between 50 and 60 billion. That number has now risen, despite this program, to over 70 billion, which is the amount of money that municipalities owe to Eskom. And I think it's important, perhaps also for the committee, to reflect on this and for us to request the support of Parliament on this matter, because there's a big fiscal risk emerging in this area where municipalities are not collecting the electricity revenue due to them. They are not paying it on to Eskom, which undermines Eskom's ability to invest and its balance sheet, and then shows up as a fiscal risk down the line. So perhaps at a next opportunity, Chair, we can provide the committee with an update on this matter, so that we can see how we can work together to resolve it. I'll now hand over to Rendani to touch on some of the other questions, and then see with my colleagues if any of them want to come in. But I do think the minister's covered most of it. Rendani?
Thanks, DG, and thanks, Minister. I will deal with the question by Honorable Speaker. I couldn't get his name, but it's Speaker number 1, the use of unspent funds. I think I need to highlight that we haven't effected any variance or shifting of funds on the basis that the appropriation bill is not yet passed, the one that we're talking about. So if it's not yet passed, we can't begin to effect any variance, including those variants that are provided for in the Treasury regulations or the PFMA, mainly because funds are not yet appropriated. That's point number 1. In the past, after the bill was being passed, yes, variants were effected, And in the adjustment publication, for all the votes, there's a footnote where we indicate 1 and 2. I think 1 is approval by Parliament and 2 by the National Treasury. So all of that information is already out there in the publications, especially in the AENE. On section 6, like I said, we haven't invoked that section because the bill is not yet passed. I think there was a question on NHI. I will ask my colleague, Mark, to talk a bit about NHI. I'll leave it at that at the moment. Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair and honourable members. If I can respond briefly on the NHI question and also one or two of the other health questions. So firstly, on the NHI itself, there are currently preparatory grants in the framework that you are approving for NHI. There's both an indirect grant for NHI and a direct grant for NHI. Those collectively amount to about $1 billion a year at the moment. It will take at least 2 years to list the NH fund as a public entity. And so one's not seeing the big funds for NHI coming in yet. So those will be something that you will need to consider perhaps next year or the year after, but they're not yet in this budget. There's just the preparatory funds. The NHI Act is not yet promulgated. The regulations are not yet out. So there's still a lot of preparatory work that is underway. On medical legal, honourable member, the budgeting for medical legal is done by the provinces at present. It's not under the vote of the national department, and that's why you can't see it in these numbers. Increasingly, we are requesting provinces to make appropriate provision in their budgets for medical legal claims, and there's also a process of reform of the medical legal arrangements, which would be quite good if this committee were to engage over time with the health and justice portfolios to look at how that space can be amended. On the pandemic preparations, they are to some extent funded through the transfers to the National Institute of Communicable Diseases. Currently, that body sits as a kind of sub-entity under the National Health Laboratory Service. Their size of their transfers is something we are trying to keep an eye on. But the mother body, the NHLS, is currently sitting on quite large accumulated surpluses. So we don't think they're under any threat at present. South Africa is also contributing to and is also applying to the pandemic fund and is working with the pandemic fund. So I think there is some ongoing work going in those arrangements. Given the time considerations, those are just some brief comments on those 3 health questions, including the NHI one. Chair, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Chair, I see Edgar, the head of our budget office, wants to come in as well, if I'm not mistaken. There's no one else in the rooms. We've been covered. So Edgar, and then we can hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable members. But just 2 questions on my side that were asked by Honourable members. Firstly, there was a question, I think, by Honourable Douglas after he referred to the environments on the issue of the number in respect of emergencies. As Minister has already indicated, we do have a contingency reserve, but we do consider that particularly over the last few years, events have moved in a direction that suggests to us that it's probably not enough. But of course, in addition to the contingency reserve, it's important for the committee to note the fact that we do make provisions in the budget for disasters at both the provincial and municipal level, and these are allocated via the division of revenue. And the summary in this regard, I would refer honorable members to table 6.3 of the budget review, which was tabled in February and presented to the joint committees at the time after the tabling of that budget. With respect to 2023, which Honorable Douglas asked about as my interpretation was as a historical reflection on what happened last year. Out of the contingency reserve of 5 billion, 4.6 billion was withdrawn last year. A significant portion of that was for unforeseen and unavoidable events, natural disasters such as floods and so forth, as well as for rollovers and other smaller unforeseen events. However, as I said, in addition to the contingency reserve, we have disaster grants for both provinces and municipalities. So in 2023, Honorable Douglas, we had 150 million for provincial disasters and 2.3 billion for municipal disasters. Of course, it's difficult to have a discernible baseline for disasters, and I think for us the key thing is to treat the issue of contingencies as part of building fiscal buffers, which of course requires, among other things, for us to strengthen the overall fiscal framework, reduce the debt burden, and reduce the fiscal deficit, which makes it easier to make provision for contingencies. The last question I want to address is I'm not sure the names of the members have the same challenge as yourself, Honorable Chair. There was a question around budget cuts and whether they're indiscriminate or affect service delivery. I would refer honorable members in this regard to Chapter 5 of the budget review, which was tabled in the February budget, where we articulate the fact that, first of all, it is very, very difficult in a constrained fiscal environment to avoid a situation where there is an impact on service delivery budgets. And we are in a very constrained fiscal environment, as the minister indicated, both at the time of the budget and today. However, we have made an attempt to be targeted in our approach, and as a result of that, we have sought to maintain the social wage at 60%. And to the question of what it will look like over the years, we anticipate that it will remain at around 60% of the budget over the medium term, in line with our attempt to protect it. And in addition to that, we have also sought to avoid making any new reductions to infrastructure investments. So if you look at capital investments as articulated in Chapter 5 of the budget review, you will see that they still grow significantly above inflation because we have sought to avoid making any reductions in that area. So I just thought I'd touch on that to indicate that while it is extremely difficult and under the most extreme circumstances, all programs do get affected, we have sought to be more targeted and to avoid a significant impact on some services. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Chair, back to you.
Thank you very much, DG. There are some new fresh hands that are occurring. If I can request of the members that we make it brief and succinct and speedily as possible. Of course, I did ask questions about growth funding initiatives emanating from the NDP and some of the other targets, and maybe to supplement the question even more, because I didn't think it was dealt with on the two big SOEs being Transnet and Eskom, and whether that funding model has been accounted for in order to ensure that we can have an extensive debate about the social wage component. I think it would be also important to note the minister's comments that say that GDP growth at 0.8% is insufficient, and therefore, however way we look at the use of that social wage, it's going to be important that we have growth initiatives so that we can have job creating aspects to the way society is engaging with the budget. So I'd like to get perhaps maybe some of those on those 2 points, because I don't think they were covered earlier on. But let me recognize Honorable Kingsley, Honorable Wesley, Honorable Burke, and Umama Ulebohang, so that we can go quickly in those. So in that order, let me start with Honorable Udatu Kingsley.
Chair, I'm going to try to be very quick. Thank you very much. I was reasonably covered. The one matter, if the outer years are still looking at 60% social cover, my concern lies around the program of EPWP, and I would assume that when we go to Lekgotla that we can possibly engage on a matter of the sustainability of EPWP and the impact of that. And there wasn't a clear answer on that. If I can just get a clear indication, does National Treasury currently see the EPWP program as part of the social cover for our poorest of the poor, or are we looking at it as a growth opportunity? And I think that's the discussion that we need to engage on. I think I'm covered in that regard. And then just lastly, Chair, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the meeting so far. Thank you very much.
Honorable Douglas Wesley.
Good day. Thank you, Chair. Once again, thank you to the Minister and the Treasury Department and all the presenters. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I just want to follow up again on the issue of fiscal dumping. I think it's one of the issues that we didn't really raise as much of as I'd like to see. The reason is because I know of certain deals that were signed, whether it's by CEF or any other of the big departments that signed big deals, that were signed in the months leading up to the elections, once they felt that there was some possibility that they will not be in government again. So I want to have sight of those that were signed in haste. And I want to make sure that those big deals is told to us as the committee, and it comes under scrutiny by Treasury. I also want to talk about debt and about our deficits. I heard a little bit about it, but I want to know which particular debt deals were signed with organizations like the IMF, World Bank, and other financial institutions, even in the BRICS environment. Which were the big financial loans that was taken in the last 12 months? I'd like to see a breakdown of that. And then I think that will cover me for now, just to give everybody else an opportunity. Thank you.
Honorable Mark Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I had the pleasure of meeting the DG and some of his team earlier this week in the Standing Committee on Finance, and I expressed to him that where Treasury continues to do the good work that it's developed a reputation for, they will enjoy our support. I want to perhaps start with using the Minister's example of NSFAS and agree with his assessment that the funding has increased, but the experience of students who are our country's future leaders has deteriorated. And so I want to perhaps use a relevant anecdote to pose my question, if you'll allow me half a minute. More than a decade ago, as a student on a scholarship, I always diligently made my rental payments, and Cape Town was experiencing overwhelming rain, much like we are this week, and the geyser dramatically collapsed through the ceiling. And I promptly informed my landlord, and he casually ignored me for more than 2 months. I spoke to my father, who was an attorney, and eventually decided to withhold rent, and the landlord resolved the issue in a matter of days. The point being that money talks. So my question is one of appetite, not of practicalities, although the Division of Revenue Act and the Public Finance Management Act dictates this. What is the appetite of the Executive and Treasury to delay or suspend payments in real time for entities that are not meeting their targets and that are actually developing a reputation like NSFAS is for misspending funds that has been allocated?
Thank you. I'd recognize Umama, if you can come next, if you can. Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you unless it's just me. So can't hear you. Honorable Mudiba. Oh, as the official from Treasury. Yeah, sorry. We are struggling to hear you. You are on mute, so perhaps maybe if I can, I'm going to suppress you in the meantime until Treasury then comes around to respond, and then if you wouldn't mind, you can supplement onto that point. I thought we were discussing as honorable members. So let me hand over to Honorable Van Rooyen.
Just two quick questions. Now, in fact, the first one is more of a comment to clarify my earlier question. The issue on the delay, Minister, I think my question was misconstrued, and the explanation also seems to be assuming that members of the 7th administration understand what happened in the 6th administration. The reality of the matter is that what happened in the 6th administration is completely new to the 7th administration, and I think that's the perception that should be carried through this particular process. So as we don't treat the 7th administration as a continuation of the 6th administration. We are a new administration. We went to elections, and a different product came out of that process. So my delay, the question of the delay was the consideration from National Treasury of the fact that here we are having new participants who were not there when other processes, due processes, as prescribed by legislations, were undertaken. So how do we accommodate that in our planning? It can't be business as usual as if it's just a normal continuation. And that's exactly my assertion. Hence the question, what are the lessons learned, by National Treasury, so as in future, we don't find ourselves having to subject public representatives to undue pressure. And then secondly, maybe the question, we approach the elections with a limping fiscus. And then out of the election, then, of course, as I've indicated earlier on, came out something that we were not expecting, called the Government of National Unity, with a bloated and ballooned executive. What is the impact of this arrangement to the allocations that were meant for the key mandate of government? Development, as well as service delivery. And I know, Chairperson, in your previous life, you were very, very eloquent on this particular phenomena of a bloated executive. So I hope my question will be more understood by yourself, because if we don't do this analysis properly, I think we might miss the boat, because I think National Treasury, as the custodian of the fiscus, must come out clear and give a sound advice to the nation. So as also as politicians, because politicians, sat down after the elections together with their friends in business and decided on such an outcome. So it's important for National Treasury to take this opportunity and to advise on the impact of such decisions, because it seems as if no consideration was made by those who pursued this particular outcome, except settling political, undertakings. So what is the advice of National Treasury on this, but also what is its impact on the allocations? Thank you very much.
And I think even as we have conversations for the midterm adjustment budget, the question you raised about the size of cabinet and its impact on its on the broader budget allocations is going to be an important one. So Let me allow Treasury to respond, and perhaps DG, if you can recognize Mele Bohang, and then she can be able to make input in that regard. I wasn't certain which aspect of the question she was responding to, so I don't want to interfere with your program, and then maybe some of the questions that have followed subsequently to that. I will close now the question sessions, and your response then will put the matter. There are some steps that we need to take, obviously, post facto this meeting. So I want to keep us honest with our time. DG?
Okay. Before DG, that person, let me deal just with three questions. And this, DM Masond has joined us. I forgot to introduce it. He is part of us here. When we did the introduction, he was not here, so my apologies. Let me deal with the public works, extended public works program. Let me say, what does international literature tell us about extended public works program? Extended public works programs are part of what is called a comprehensive social security program. What are the elements of that comprehensive social security program? The first one is social insurance, which is things like NHI and others. The second one is social assistance, which is grants which we provide. The third element is active labor market interventions, which may include training, public works programs, and so on. Is it sustainable in this present form? It's something we need to debate. It's something we need to debate and say, if we're going to go as the Department of Social Security has done, Social Development has done, produced a comprehensive social security document, what are the implications for all of these pieces of things that we have together? And how do we make sure that we adjust them? So that's broadly where we're heading with the extended public works. Insofar as fiscal dumping, let me just say it takes a couple of forms. This one, honorable members, Honorable Douglas is referring to, it's something new, if I understand it correctly. Ordinarily, what happens when people talk about fiscal dumping, they talk about when departments, for instance, dump funds at the end of the financial year in subnational governments, so in provinces, in municipalities. What the honorable members seem to suggest is that the agreement signed by a number of government departments and a number of state institutions such as CF, I don't know. We don't have the full details of those agreements now. As the process unfolds, whether it was fiscal dumping or anything, maybe if they want us, we can dig that information, or via the relevant committee of mineral resources, that information should be asked. But if we're asked to go and dig it, we can. The last issue before I give to the DG is the bloated cabinet. Is the bloated cabinet. I would imagine the outcome of the elections suggests that we should be forming a government, whether it was going to be a government of whatever size, but it was a government which includes, because there was no outright winner. In that sense, we needed to bring all others. At a cabinet level, the difference is two. We had 30 cabinet ministers, today we've got 32. So the difference is two. Is that much? Of course, in DMs, a bit of a spice is there. We are looking at the implications of that in terms of, I don't think that's likely to have major impact on development and service delivery, because it's a couple of millions which may not, on their own, will not likely have an impact. Let me caution against an expectation that we may do something in the medium-term budget policy statement and adjustment. The adjustment process requires the Act give us only 7 conditions under which we can do an adjustment budget. All of those things, for them to meet the adjustment budget, they'll have to meet that test, those 7 conditions in terms of Section 30 of the Public Finance Management Act. Not everything qualifies to be included in the adjustment estimate. Is the debate also I've been having with some of my colleagues. We think that now we can do an amendment to the we can do adjustment. Adjustments are done in terms of the law, and there are only 7 conditions that have got to be met in order to qualify for the adjustment. I wanted to make those few points, Chair, and hand over to the DG.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, with your permission, we'll just now respond to a few of those outstanding questions. Let me check with Lebogang. She's in the public finance team. I think she wanted to add some perspectives on EPWP. Lebo, were you covered by the minister, or is there any additions you'd like to make?
No, Lebo, the microphone is not working there.
Okay, good, Chair. So now to deal with the other questions, Chair and Honourable Chair, and to start with yours, around the growth initiatives. I think the point the minister's made, and I think Edgar's made as well, which is the key challenge of the fiscal framework, and therefore has implications for how we think about appropriations, is, as the honourable members will know, for the last 10 years, the economy has grown in real terms at an average of around 1% per year. And if you combine that with a population that's growing at 1.4, 1.5% a year, it means that in real terms, your economy cannot sustain your spending ambitions. And so that means growth becomes a very important priority. We have articulated in the budget, Honourable Chair, that we consider there to be 3 fundamental pillars of a growth strategy. The first is a sound and stable macroeconomic framework with low inflation, because without stable finances and without a macro framework that is conducive to growth, it becomes very difficult to do business. The second element, Chair, of our growth strategy, which has taken some attention also of the Deputy Minister, is around the implementation of structural reforms, and in particular Operation Vulindlela and the coordination with the Presidency in this regard, so that we are able to deal with the very significant bottlenecks, in particular in energy and logistics, but also more broadly. And I'll touch on Transnet and Eskom in a shortly, Honourable Chair. And we are now shifting the work of that reform agenda, building on the successes in the first phase that has contributed to some of the changes we've seen in electricity, into a new phase of that structural reform agenda, which will start shortly. But we will also ensure that we finish the few outstanding reforms from the first phase, so that we can get growth higher. And then finally, Chair, the third pillar is around a capable and effective state, and a big component there is infrastructure. And there's a lot of work happening inside the National Treasury that we would like to present as part of the medium-term budget policy statement. Innovations around funding and financing for infrastructure, budget process reforms that are meant to crowd in more infrastructure investment, as well as mechanisms to bring the private sector more effectively into our infrastructure ambitions. Secondly, Honourable Chair, in terms of the questions around Eskom and Transnet and their interaction with the fiscal framework, as you know, we announced a total debt relief package for Eskom of 254 billion. We've reduced that from 254 to 250 billion, because one of the conditions that Eskom did not meet in order to qualify for the full debt relief package was the sale of the Eskom Finance Company, which they still have not concluded. And with the help of Parliament, we passed an Eskom debt relief amendment bill earlier this year, which allowed us to amend that amount and to strengthen the oversight mechanisms that we place on SOEs that receive bailouts from the fiscus. On Transnet, Honourable Chair, as the members would be aware, we provided a 47 billion rand guarantee to Transnet, so not a direct fiscal outlay, and we are working very closely with Transnet to ensure that they are able to meet their infrastructure needs through support from this guarantee and through broader reforms in the sector as articulated in the freight logistics roadmap. Finally, Chair, from my side, there was a question about the specific deals and debt agreements that have been struck. We raise, Chair and honourable members, the vast majority of our borrowing through our auctions. We have Treasury bill auctions in the order of about 14 billion rand per week that take place on Mondays. We have fixed rate bond auctions that take place every week as well on Wednesdays. And we've got inflation-linked bond auctions that take place. Those are the ways which we raise the bulk of our, and then there are minor other auctions, floating rates and switches and so on. We also supplement our market funding with concessional loans from international agencies that are much more competitively priced, and we use that to bring down our cost of borrowing. In table 7.5 of the budget review, Honourable Chair, we list all of those loans that have been taken out with all of the relevant institutions, the New Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and so on and so forth. We indicate the disbursement date of those loans, the interest rate, and the committee members will see how concessional they are, the term, the grace period, and the amount. And we update that table every budget. And as soon as new loans are finalized, we announce them as well. So the honourable member can refer to table 7.5. And then if there are any other transactions we do during the course of this year, we will announce them and then update table 7.5 again at the time of the February budget.
Yes. Well, the Honourable Van Rooyen raised the issue of the new administration, which he says we've not taken into account. To our knowledge, we've always been ready to move and brief the committee. The unfortunate thing, Honourable Van Rooyen, the delay is not, I think the committee was set up 2 days ago. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the committee was set up 2 days ago. There was no intention at all on our part to delay in presentation to this new administration. We make no assumptions. We've made it in the opening remarks that it is unfortunate that virtually every member of this committee is new, and we're making no assumption that members of this commission are familiar with what happened in the 6th administration across political parties. When I look at the members of the committee, to the extent that if that impression was created, we apologize for that. As I've indicated, the committee was set up 2 days ago. As soon as the chairperson, he can attest to that. As soon as he was elected and he conducted us, we are available to meet. Thank you.
No, I think if I can echo the sentiments that I expressed across, we met even not only the committee looking at the secretariat to deal with the truncation of the program, given the few delays that have occurred, both as a function of the cabinet announcement and the mirroring of portfolio committees, the establishment of the committees that then took place. Minister, you are correct in that we were convened on Wednesday. And then in the initial frame, we were meant to have been convened on Tuesday so that the Treasury presentation could have been on Thursday. But as soon as we made contact and the adjustment, I want to appreciate the team from Treasury were able to accommodate so that we can do it on Friday. And I can assure members in looking at the draft agenda that we're going to be fairly busy in the next week in being able to do so. It is not unique only to this particular committee. I can affirm that it's happening across all committees. I mean, even in the in other committees, there's been a truncating of the program and a catch-up. This particular one obviously has an urgency in that the appropriations bill is a bill as a law has to be passed, and so all of the issues that members are raising both emanate from the pressures created by law, the pressure created by the practice of simply convening Parliament, and then ultimately ensuring that we as a committee, once we've been convened, we can move from there. But I'm hoping that as we take the time in the next term, in preparation for the next, that we will be having sufficient time. In fact, I will request even from the Secretariat point of view to figure out some of the ways where we can do some of the catch-up work, because, Minister, the point is not lost on me that members who are new, especially from our perspective, it's about ensuring that we catch up so that we become, you can be assured of the oversight and the accountability that goes from there. And I want to thank Treasury for coming there. I don't think there are any more deliberations we can take on this particular point. Certainly, other than to say thank you to National Treasury, the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the respective, the Director General, and of course, I've got it that the DDG will be moving across. So we want to wish you well in that particular role and wish you strength. But certainly looking forward to engage. What the committee, I see in the chat's question, has requested details that speak to contact points. We will avail that. I'll certainly arrange with the Secretariat to do that. And I know Honorable Beck's question about not Giza's bursting, that wasn't your point, but the withholding of funding, I think, was covered within the NSFAS conversation. So, Honorable Beck, if you are sufficiently covered from there, I'll note the question if it wasn't covered, and then we'll take it on to the next briefing, if that's okay with you. Is that all right? Super. Honorable members, with that matter then dispose of, thank you so much to everybody. Let's move on to the next point in the agenda, which looks at our the consideration of the draft committee program. This was circulated to all the members yesterday. I want to perhaps maybe drawing on to, if you look at the respective dates that have been put forward to that, members, that has been put to you. I don't need to speak to it. The only point I want to emphasize is the point about...
Chair,
sorry?
Can I assume that at this point we're excused?
Yes, Treasury, please feel free. You can be excused. Ndiabulela, thank you so much, Minister.
Sure, thanks.
And thanks, please convey our thanks to the team. Yeah. As you would have seen the program that is before you now being put on the screen, I want to emphasize the critical points about the public hearings. Naturally, we would have wanted to, again, in the pressure of it being truncated and having to be so soon, the advertisements have been sent out, will be sent out today. I wanted to request, with the permission of the committee, that we use multiple platforms to enhance public participation, of which one of them is about sending notifications to our respective stakeholders who have historically participated in the public hearing process. We also use our internal, our traditional points of communications, whether it's our website and certainly any other platform that we've historically used. I want to request that we use now also traditional or conventional media. And so I've requested our community communications officer that we issue a statement that we can hopefully be able to secure any interviews, perhaps maybe with a public broadcaster, so we can invite South Africans to participate on this. I think as a committee, we must dare never lose track of our responsibility as to the citizens of this country and their inputs going forward. So part of this work is required to do that. We have already some indications that people will be coming through. So those will be scheduled for next week, Friday. Having said that, we've obviously got a briefing next week with the FFC, and then hopefully a briefing with the Parliamentary Budget Office. Then there's, of course, the crucial on the 25th of July, having covered, we will on the 23rd of July, we have to meet to consider the adoption of the committee's draft report for the appropriations. And then obviously on the 25th itself, we will be debating this matter in the National Assembly. Having put that agenda before you, may I ask if there are any members who have any inputs, questions, or can we adopt this as the program for the next one? There are some hands that have gone, or one hand that has gone up, and perhaps if I can, Darren, I see your hand is up there. I don't know if you've got something to say. And then Honorable Neil May, and then Honorable Kingsley. So let me start with Darren. I saw your hand was up.
No, Chairperson, that's not my end. That's not my end.
Not your...
No, Chair.
You know, emojis all come in one color, so I must just check. You know,
it's Miss Bartlett's end.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Let me then, in that case, Honorable Douglas.
Mr. Chair, no, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I just wanted to check on the additional dates that you had added in when we'll be doing things like the FFC and the parliamentary fiscal budget. Do we have times, dates for those presentations as yet? And then if those separate ones can also be updated to the program so that we know that we have a detailed program for presentations, for when the debate will be. The debate is fine. When will we find out the allocations of time and all those kind of things? So, but otherwise, I'm happy for us to go ahead with it as these come.
Honorable Douglas, if the presentation that is before you here on screen, I'm sure already indicates the date that the FFC will be on Tuesday, which is next week, the 16th of July, and then the PBO will be on the 17th at 9 a.m. And what I'm trying to also figure out, as much as virtual is convenient, I would like for at least we figure out ways where we can meet in person. This way, it will help certain aspects. So those dates are put before you there. They are not additional. They are the ones that were tabled in the draft agenda. Is that okay?
Thank you, Jay.
Honorable Kingsley. Kingsley, over to you.
Thanks, Jay. Just a matter of logistics and practical, as I'm new to the committee, I just want to get an indication from you as Chair. These dates set out, you now sort of indicated some will be virtual, some will be in person. If we can get some clarity on that, and my request is further to that, if we do set up hybrid, that will be good. If we do have a physical meeting on a Tuesday, just from a logistic practical point of view, if it's possible to push out the time to 10 o'clock to give people a chance, if we do miss a flight on a Monday, to at least come in on a Tuesday early. That's just a practical arrangement I would like to just check with you. And maybe if we can indicate on a program which one will be virtual and which one will be physical, please, to Chair. Thank you.
I'll certainly put that. I really would be keen, especially for the adoption of the committee's draft report, for that to be physical. Then that is still in enough lead time. The others we can, because they are inherently presentations, I don't mind them being virtual. But if I can ask the committee, because given that we are new, not in Parliament or whatever, but we are new as a working committee, it is ideal that we interact in person, especially earlier on. This way we can create collegiality and a sense of team and working together. So I think that's going to be important. Honorable Bartlett.
Yes, no, Chair already covered me. Sorry for not switching my video on. I think you asked if we can accept the agenda or the report. So that's when I wanted to come in, but then the other honorable members already spoke, Chair. Just to accept this easy.
Okay. So given those inputs, I don't see any other hands unless I have missed them.
Chair, sorry, it's me.
Oh,
Honourable
yes,
Neil
sorry,
May.
Honorable Neil May.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the session. It was very informative, and also being new to the committee, but luckily not new to finance. From a local government, I was a MMC for finance at some stage. What I'm saying is that I'd like to accept the program that we have here. I think the time aspect, you're quite right. If it's on a Tuesday, maybe we can have it starting 10, because obviously we fly, and with the climate change and the planes that are not landing, we might have an aspect on the Tuesday. But otherwise, I have no problems with virtual or physical. I would like at some stage maybe for us to meet ourselves even before a lot of the programs, just to get to know a little bit more of what is expected of us, and as a committee, just to get to know each other as well, so that going forward, we also seem to all be on the same page. I like your input. I heard you on radio the other day, it was on TV, and the vision, what it is that is expected of us. So I'm happy with what is before us. I'm happy with the what we need to do before the 25th of July. I must just check Scopa. I'm also on Scopa. I haven't received any of my programs yet, but otherwise, thank you very much, Chair.
Noted there. I think the only last hand is Honorable Mazibuko. If I've got it wrong, or is Honorable no able? That's fine. You are recognized, Honorable Member. But you are not recognizing us. You have gone mute. Sorry, Honorable Member, your device has gone mute, so none of us can hear you, unless but I can't. Can I ask if the Honorable Member can type the input on the chat group? That might be easier. I find that sometimes when we can't hear one another, we can be able to put it on the chat group. With all the deliberations then being taken, I do note the point that members are making that says that if it is a physical, let us aim for 10 a.m. On a Tuesday specifically. I accept that members were flying in from various provinces and delays and all of that. That adjustment can be made. I will certainly discuss it with the Secretariat. I don't foresee it being a problem. But what I will then ask is certainly what we will do if the principle of the program is finalized, we will members have it. If there are any adjustments, we'll certainly communicate those timelessly so that members know, and then we'll add an additional column that confirms whether the session is virtual or in person, and noting the comments that are made by Honorable Neil May that it is going to be important for us for that point about collegiality, just to meet in person so that we get an understanding in a prior meeting about some of the responsibilities that are going forward. I thought in my opening remarks, I looked at some of the strategic objectives of the sixth administration, and I do think we have to meet together as a committee to take some time to be able to articulate a strategic planning session for the work of the committee, looking at what the seventh administration and what goals and targets we set for ourselves. I always say to one of the key points, and I think the members who are here would agree, that what we cannot do is inherit. And I think that was part of the point that Honorable Van Rooyen was making. You can't take the sixth administration's program, inherit it, and then simply say, let's continue business as usual. I certainly do think that as a committee, it is going to be crucial that we almost take the reality and cognizance of the current frame, plan for the seventh administration, and so that when we look at the legacy report of this particular committee, we can be able to say, well, we set ourselves objectives to doing this. consistent with our legislative framework and its empowerment of this particular committee in what it can do. And we've been able to achieve that. We're not writing a legacy report looking forward. We must write a legacy report looking backwards and say, this is what we would want the 7th Administration Appropriations Committee legacy to be. So I think that workshop will be planned and certainly will form part of the earlier parts of the next, certainly in the beginning of the next term. I know that there's a chairperson's induction that has been scheduled, and I'd like for us to look at that. Let me move for an adoption of this particular item. Is there?
Chair.
Yebo.
Hi, Chair. Sorry, my apologies. I had to change to another gadget. That gadget couldn't give me. I'm sorry to speak after you have summarized, but I'm just making one request that as we prepare for the Tuesday briefing by FFC, if we could get the documentation on time. It would have been nice if the documents are available, the presentations, if we get them over the weekend, so that we can go through those presentations and familiarize ourselves, especially the members of the committee who are new in the committee. I agree with the workshop, and maybe we can make input as members as to which information do we think can assist us during the workshop. Maybe we can do those presentations if you allow that process as we prepare for the workshop. Thank you.
Certainly, you are. Feel free to, if we can make those submissions in writing so that we don't draft a program by committee. But if you can make those submissions, I'm happy for Ufuneka to receive those. And then once we compile it and plan it for the next term, we'll be able to make the submission in that regard. Having done that, can I ask for a mover for the adoption of the program?
I shall move for the adoption of the program, Mr. Chair. Honorable Wesley Douglas moves for the adoption of the program. Thank you.
I am assuming Honorable Neil May, you are raising your hand to second.
Honorable Bartlett.
Correct, Honorable Neil May. I am seconding the what Honorable Wesley has proposed. Thank you.
With that being said, I will note it. Let it be noted.
I'm also my name is Lakhanyan.
Oh,
I'm coming third after Honorable Wesley and Honorable May. I'm saving the proposal.
Fantastic. With that being done, I will assume that the program is also duly adopted, and so we will then work according to this. Just in terms of any other announcements, I'd already made one regarding communicating the public engagements. And so we will certainly have asked the communications officer with a draft statement just to announce those. Those will all be circulated, and they needed to be signed in the name of the chairperson. That's the delay, but they should be out in principle today, and then we will issue out that statement and hopefully to put out a broader public communication to ensure that we can engage the public in their submissions going into for next week, so that we are ready for that. I don't think there's any other announcements or correspondence. I don't know if the Secretariat, if there's something from your end that I need to be aware of.
No,
anything
from our side.
Okay, honorable members, with that being mine, let me thank you for a fruitful engagement. I think that as a committee, we'll certainly be putting a lot of work together. We've got to make sure as an appropriations committee, the legislative work that we've got, the ability to be able to hold accountability, but also given the legacy of the report, the law empowers us to do much more than just what perhaps maybe historically has been the case. And I think there's a massive opportunity for us to collaborate as parties and ensure that the 60 million South Africans are well served by the work of the Appropriations Committee. So without delaying much further, let me thank you for the spirited engagement, and I look forward to seeing you next week. I would assume the first one naturally will be virtual, and so we'll see each other on the screens. And hopefully for those of us who are technologically challenged in any way, we can catch up and change names. I'm speaking to myself here. I'll adjust my name. I might call myself Comrade. No. I'll see how we go. But wish you all a fantastic weekend, and stay warm if you're in the Republic of Cape Town. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a blessed weekend, all people. Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye, colleagues. Have a
Long
nice
live,
weekend.
long live the chairperson, long live honorable members.
Recording stopped.